hi you all, and welcome to the Kubetalk video chat. I'm Rotem, I'm Director of Engineering from ARMO, and I have a passion for Kubernetes, DevOps, coding, and baking and basketball, but I think we'll leave it for another video chat. And like, if you have any comments or ideas, please put it right here. I'll upload this like those kinds of videos every week with like different guests that has the same passion of I do. And today the topic is migrating to microservices in Kubernetes, the good, bad, and the ugly. Okay, so here with me is Donald Lutz, Senior Cloud and Software Architect at Taos. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I have a big passion for enterprise architecture, Kubernetes, microservices, and event-driven architecture. Like robots and a few other things too.
So great. We have like a few things in common, I see. So we're first breaking the ice here, and like a small question for our beginning is, if you weren't like a cloud architect or architect in general, what do you think you'll be?
That is I don't know what else I would do, honestly, because it just seemed to fit me naturally. I thought early on I wanted to be a physicist, but I really liked the math and I didn't really get the physics. So that might have been an area, but I think where I ended up is where I should have been.
Okay, that's a great answer, actually. I think so I myself as well. Maybe a baker, but not sure of that.
I watch baking shows, but I'm not a baker.
It's very similar to mathematics. So I see many things in common. So now let's begin and discuss what we're here for. And you're a big advocate of microservices, and tell us all what's the big deal. Why should we even adopt it?
I mean, microservices is a more clean way to build applications. So it allows you to build. There's a thing called domain-driven design, so you can actually create something called a bounded context. So if you were building an ordering system, you can have an order, a customer, you can break those up into smaller microservices. And it's easier than building a monolith, which has the problem that you have to basically always deploy the monolith as one big thing, whereas microservice, you can deploy them individually. That adds to the complexity, GitHub, GitOps, DevOps, all those kind of issues, which causes lots of issues. And for companies that aren't at the maturity level, that is what really gets them the process end of the microservices and kind of understanding, because they also have to accept that it's going to live in a container and you're going to have to orchestrate that container. And there's a lot of things that go along with that. And that is one of the reasons large companies are struggling with that, because it's very different way to approach it. And one of my favorite articles of all time is called The Big Ball of Mud. It was a paper written many years ago, and it's about the idea of, it's kind of an allegory about a monolith. Basically, like if a big ball of mud rolled down the hill and you pulled out 13 sticks, 500 stones would fall out. You'd have no idea how they're interconnected, because the interdependencies in monolith are really hard to break and test. It causes lots of problems.
Yeah, I totally agree. I tried in my previous works and roles to break one of the monoliths, and it was really hard. So we got the good, and I think we touched the bad thing in microservices. But can you tell us, like, briefly what's the even the downside of
the downside is some people say if you were like starting a startup, it would be easier to build an app that was monolithic because you could map the features out easily.
Right.
So there's kind of this debate whether, you should start there, or if you have, a bunch of legacy code, it's very difficult to encapsulate them, which then gets to why you might want to look like at an event-driven architecture with Kafka, Apache Pulsar, way to separate out that data effectively, but you have to handle there's a lot of cultural things that you have to make happen within your organization. You have to figure out, okay, we need to break up teams maybe smaller than they've been. We need to have really clearly defined boundaries. What are all the test cases we need? It's not just unit tests. You have to figure out what are your integration tests, what are your end-to-end tests? How do I do my deployments? Then you have to start looking at things like branching. Do you branch off features? Well, if you do, that's hard to resolve. It's better to branch off trunks. So every day, everything gets remerged. And so there's always a main branch that doesn't get changed. So there's a lot of concepts that have to, you also have to accept some of the domain-driven design ideas, because you have to start looking at, how do I model this correctly? What does my domain model look like? You have to buy off on this idea of ubiquitous language, which is a domain-driven design concept that, I've made developers who work for me, when you write the code, you do this thing called event storming, where you take sticky notes and you map out what does your domain look like. And everybody uses the same word, no matter what their role is within the company: business, technical, system administration. So those are all the very important cultural things that have to be addressed, which is what makes it really difficult. Because, historically, monoliths they create a bunch of user stories, and nobody really knows what those terms and those user stories meant. So they didn't really have ubiquitous language. Then they start writing code. Then there's lots of issues about, how do we know this really maps to what we have? Because, those user stories are not as explicit as they need to be. So those are like the larger issues you run into that can cause all kinds of issues, crazy issues.
Yeah. So you probably know what my next question is how that Kubernetes helps us, manage it, and why is it even there? Why do we need it?
Well, once you get containers, you need a way to deal with all the workloads, which is fundamentally what Kubernetes does for you. It allows you to spin them up, how many you want. You can describe how many instances you need. It's very valuable. Before Kubernetes, there were a lot of different approaches. Netflix had Eureka. There were a lot of, there was Docker, Swarm. There was a whole host of different things. And there are debates whether Mesos was better than Kubernetes, but the war was won by Kubernetes. And the thing that Kubernetes provides people, I think, is it's a platform in which you can put your microservices in. That's its value. You can write operators, you can control your databases. But, in a certain sense, there was a podcast a couple of weeks ago, a gentleman gave, it's about how Kubernetes will eventually become invisible like Linux. It's just there. You won't think about it. It won't be this hot, cool thing. It'll be a requirement of having a platform in which you can put microservices in.
Wow, I totally agree with that. And I'm just waiting for it to happen since we're not there yet. But I totally get like where we're heading to with Kubernetes. Like we want to have like transparent infrastructure layer that we don't need to deal with. And coding can be done when you don't even know what's in there.
Right.
So let's say I'm now in a different company and I want to start coding with microservices, or coding in microservices way, or even I have a monolith and want to separate it. So how should I begin doing that?
Well, if you have a monolith, then there's the whole idea of the strangler fig pattern, which was created by Martin Fowler. The whole idea is you try to, you start out with your monolith and you say, okay, I want to move feature A into a microservice. So you actually go and build it, put it in a container, write it in whatever language. Doesn't really matter. That also causes lots of microservices issues because, if you use Java, C#, whatever language fits, put it in the container. Then you want to put it in a platform like Kubernetes where you can measure it. And then, once that, everybody starts using the microservices, you can turn off the part that used to run in the monolith. So that's the strangler fig. It's strangling out the parts of the monolith you don't want, and that is a complicated thing to achieve, because it's really hard to make sure that you get all the business cases. Do you understand all the rules? A lot of the monoliths are not written in a very coherent manner, so it's very hard to figure out. You have business logic, stored procedures, everything is mixed together in a mishmash.
And
Which gets in
databases
and
so
everything.
much more.
And the other thing that this is a great idea, this thing's called a hexagonal architecture. It was created about 25 years ago. And the whole idea is you have in the middle, you have your domain logic, then you have services, and then you have ports and adapters. So you can have ports and adapters that are for databases or REST services versus gRPC. So that's why it's hexagonal. It's not just 6, but it implies it's not a layered architecture. The problem with a layered architecture, you have everything is on top of each other. You have a UI, you have some services, you have a database layer. It's really hard to pull those apart. With a hexagonal architecture, you just replace the different ports and adapter, and it works really well. But it's kind of a really different approach than people are used to. They also call it clean architecture, and it's a really valuable way in which to build microservices.
So I'll be really happy if you can share some links regarding that, or even podcast or something like that. We're getting into the final round of this video cast. So can you please share a video, a podcast, or an article, maybe an influencer that we can follow?
I would go to everything Martin Fowler has. He's got a really good set of articles that are out there. Jimmy Bogard, who's like a Microsoft MVP, he has a really good set of things to look at. Those are the people. Eric Evans has some great articles on domain-driven design. Those are the ones I can think off the top of my head. I can send you some, actually, if you want. I will send.
I'll put here the links.
I also post a lot on LinkedIn. Everything I read or consume, I post on LinkedIn. Because I'm interested in lots of things. Because I think the whole part to really deal with microservices and event-driven architecture and Kubernetes, you need to be broader than historically technical people have been. The people, like I was fundamentally a system guy who wrote low-level compilers and stuff historically, so we always had to be broad. But a lot of business developers, they're afraid of Kubernetes. One of Kubernetes, Achilles heel is it's not very easy for them to use it. The YAML confuses them. Why is there services? Why do we have deployments? What's a load balancer? Why do I have a node port? That is Kubernetes thing, is it doesn't map extremely well to developers. It's getting there, but it's far away. There's Shippa, Microsoft one's called Project Tie, which make it simpler. It's, that is a big disconnect between all software engineers and the infrastructure side. And I know DevOps and GitOps are trying to bridge those, but it hasn't happened as well as it should yet, because there is still a large gap.
I totally agree. In my mind, developers should be the DevOps. He needs to know what's going beneath what he's coding on, and needs to know Kubernetes or which infrastructure he's using. It's part of developing, just in my opinion. Of course, it's not, there are some people that
I agree
disagree.
with you. The problem is a lot of the developers in that arena are used to writing business logic. So they have they never touched deployment. They never touched where it ran. They just wrote to the framework they were using, and all those other details were somebody else's issue. And now that this DevOps thing happened, they're just not used to bridging that gap, because they're used to using whatever MVC framework they picked, whatever REST framework they picked. And now we're saying there are these other things you have to do to be a professional. In a certain sense, that's what it sounds like to them.
Yeah, we need to, break the boundaries right there and to get into like new things. Infrastructure is new to them. But that's, in my opinion, something that's very important for a good developer to have this skill. And I guess we're going to thank you now, Donald, and appreciate it very much for being here with me today, and with our audience, of course. I'll be happy to get in touch in the future, and we'll put here the link for your LinkedIn account so we can follow you and have some of your more articles that you're writing. And thanks a lot for that, and see you all in the next Kubetalk session.
Thanks, and have a great day.
Great. Bye-bye.
Bye.